All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Modern Producer. It's been a while since we've had an episode, but we are really excited today. We've got a great guest. Dan Cloutier from Agrihub is joining us today, and we're going to be talking about regenerative agriculture. And this is a fascinating topic. It's something that's been around for a while, but the technology is kind of starting to get to a really neat point where I think people are able to start to utilize some of this technology. So I'm gonna stop talking because Dan's the expert here. And yeah, Dan, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and yeah, what we can look forward to chatting about today.
Sure. Well, quick background. I started working in a greenhouse when I was 14, and that was always very much a hobby and so forth. And spent quite a bit of time in oil and gas and supply chain associated with that. And as I was really working in those areas and studying oil and gas reserves and so forth, I ended up of the mind that said, there's no alternative to efficiency, is one of the taglines we used a lot. And really looking to say, how will we do things different? And sometimes when you study these things, and you think about net zero, it's almost like we're going back to the future, aren't we? And what I mean by that is, well, prior to fossil fuels, late 1800s, we were always net zero.
Mm-hmm.
and,
Right.
and
Yeah.
we always did closed loop, right?
Okay. Yep.
So as you say, Jake, there's new materials, there's certainly some new science in the mix that does advance that in a big way. And so there's lots of talk about regenerative agriculture. Um, Different groups might define it slightly differently or what have you. And what we're doing with Penner Agrihub is at least initially working in kind of three key areas. Um, as you know, with Penner, my slide is there. It is. Um, so as you know, with Penner, who was founded in 1956, we've always been very livestock oriented. Tagline has been "We build farms." So design, build, equipment, and then ongoing operations and maintenance. Um, the request for regenerative agriculture that's coming from our customers is an extension of that, of course. And we have this emerging whole family of companies that has been occurring through acquisition and mergers over the last number of years. And so this really takes us from Ontario all the way to the West Coast in Canada and then down into the US where you are. And so, we're very proud that gives us such a great depth of experience that can be well leveraged to this new flavor of closed loop net zero regenerative agriculture, kind of the buzzwords of the day, if you will. And it allows us to take these things from nutrition to waste and really close that loop with that skill set that we're able to deploy. So we end up, when we say we build farms, we end up looking at that in a single graphic and able to sort of show how this integrated, sustainable, regenerative loop might be. The best definition of regenerative or sustainable that I've ever come across, I think, is that it is a lifestyle designed for permanence. So
Hmm.
there's
Yeah, I
lots of
like
other
that.
things that are quite temporary, but this just potentially allows us, as an example, never to lose nutrients, right? And when you think about it, uh, nitrogen is one example. It's always a finite amount circulating throughout the globe, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
When it's really many small number of parts per billion, then it's very diluted. When it's what we're doing in this pictured barn, well, then we have some potentially some different opportunities, which is what I'll dive into. So essentially, the barn is some different materials, and then within the barn is these fodder towers, grow towers, and we'll describe some of the experience we've had working with a customer over the last 5 years in that area in the U.S. And so basically, what's being grown in those towers is about 20% of the fodder for dairy cattle. Now, there's folks doing work in this area that says, we can grow in these towers feed for hogs and poultry and so forth. Obviously, different diets.
Right.
And then we capture essentially the waste streams, the manures, the bedding, all the organics, and we turn that into some very useful things for generating more revenues, but also nutrient capture and wastewater purification, as I've touched on. And that's kind of the closed loop. So this is an actual picture of the grow towers. Wasn't fully constructed. So this occurred with a company by the name of Grove. Parent company was New Skin. And it was deployed on the Bateman dairy farm in Salt Lake City. Started about 5 years ago with the initial grow tower. Within a sprung structure, there was room for 10 of these towers. And that was a 100-foot wide building by 160 long. So literally what would occur is there was an automated seed system that was set up here, and you'd add seed to trays and then water, and you'd start a propagation or seed sprouting process. And literally the trays traveled in a circle, just kind of like an Atari racetrack, all the way up to the top of the tower and over and back down. And then you would drop essentially a tray of fodder like this every 30 seconds or 1 minute onto that conveyor belt running up the center. And ultimately what Grove had done is located a barn on the other side. And so that they would have that right into part of their feed mixing process. So really quite automated, and that's the picture of the operation from the outside. And so what they found was that they were able to replace about 40 to 50 acres of conventional cropland per tower.
Oh wow! Not just that building. Yeah, we're talking just each vertical growing tower.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, incredible.
So in this 100-foot wide by 160 long,
Mm-hmm.
which is less than an acre,
Right.
you're essentially replacing 400, 500 acres of cropland.
Wow. So how long does it take for the seed? So putting the seed into it being dumped on the conveyor and conveyored over to the cows. What's that? How long does that process take when you
Six
initially get
days.
going? 6 days. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So each one of these grows to that size and height in 6 days.
Okay. Okay.
So what Grove had called it was they were trying to give the seed its perfect growing environment every day. And then the objective is for the dairy cow that it's the optimum mix of feed every day is the objective.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, so that kind of shows you a little closer how it looked and worked. Um, and again, quite automated. Um, Quite a lot of attention was garnered on this, and so Grove was fairly early out of the gate, fairly advanced, but not the only players. So in the 5 years, what they ended up recognizing is that they could increase milk production with this mix of feed.
Okay.
And so every 1% of milk production increase, any dairy farmer will tell you, is really leads to typically, as long as the capital costs aren't too great, rather rapid paybacks on your investment.
Okay.
And they were approaching about a 20% increase in milk production, and in their case, they were providing 20% of the feed to just over 17,000 head of dairy cattle on the shore of the Salt Lake in Utah. They were finding that this mix of feed would provide a nutritional value increase. Lots more work being done in that area to fully understand it for sure. But there's no surprise. You talk to any farmer and say when there's green shoots of grass in one area of a pasture, and the rest of the pasture is brown, where do the cows gravitate to?
Right. Yeah, the fresh stuff.
Yeah, so the cows know it's healthier, and there's a possible reduction in the need for antibiotics, and then you're getting a lot of acres of growth um, per tower. And the
Mm-hmm.
fact is when it comes to fertilizers, etc., um, you don't necessarily need it, and that's what Grove found. There are some vertical fodder growers that add fertilizer anyway, hopefully to further increase that production. But
Okay.
when it comes to the seed, for those 6 days, the seed comes contained with the exception of water, pretty much with what it needs to get started.
Right.
So, very, very interesting and good learnings over 5 years, but there was an unfortunate shuttering of Grove. And so, of course, and naturally, people will ask about that. And they'll ask, well, did vertical fodder not work? Every time we're dealing with new technologies, as any venture capitalist will tell you, if they invest in 10 technologies and they get one winner, that's kind of the batting average and what they hope for, right?
Right. Yeah.
What happened with Grove, in my opinion, just because I like to be forthright about these things people want to hear and understand, is New Skin on the New York Stock Exchange, which is a multi-level marketing company for vitamins and skincare products and these sorts of things. had a CEO that had a great vision, in my view, and recognized virtually everything they sell is plant-based. And he saw that, well, growing fodder for dairy cattle is a long way from growing vitamin supplements. But they saw the opportunity to start there and invest with this small startup company.
Okay.
A few things went off the rail. There was allegedly some patent issues that arose. There was quite a lot of investment fast when New Skin got involved. And so often with technologies, sales are slower than the expenditures.
Yeah, right.
And so not all the board of New Skin by any means was fully bought into this. It seemed really outside of their lane for lots of them, and when it wasn't turning into that high revenue growth thing, relatively quickly, they decided to shutter it.
Gotcha.
It's not unusual.
Yeah. Nope.
So we're working with Hydro Greens at this time, and Hydro Greens is out of South Dakota, and they have been working with their initial pilot plant was in Vancouver, and another one in South Dakota, and so they also have had essentially a 5-year head start on the industry. And so they've got a fair amount of science that they've certainly built up, and a fast growing customer base, and some really excellent technologies and approach. Lots of it looks very different than Grove, but as you can see in the pictures, the fodder doesn't look all that different in some ways. It's just how do you get it to the cattle. And in my view, Grove had these big towers in mind, and these very, very large dairy operations.
Mm-hmm.
So they were kind of the big for the big.
Okay.
And what I really like with Hydro Green is they recognize, and let's just take Canada for example, you can't find a dairy operation that's much more than a couple thousand or 4,000 head of dairy cattle, let alone 17,000 plus, right?
Right.
And that's the case
Right.
for the by and large throughout the U.S. So Hydro Greens has a much more appropriate scale as well, which I think is great. So one part of the barn, and if you think of a vision for a net zero operation, is growing the fodder, feeding the cattle, and as I say, there's always a waste stream. In Mother Nature's parlance, she never ever knew what waste was. It just goes in a loop,
Right.
right?
Yep. Yep.
So these are just some graphics to show that we take the livestock waste, we can take crop stocks, what have you, other wastewater streams, and put these into systems that have been around for decades. Many or most farmers have a certain amount of familiarity with it. Natural gas and electricity costs in Europe in particular have been much higher than North America.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I don't know, it's almost 10 years ago now, the Department of Agriculture in the US put out that the average cost of an anaerobic digester back then was about 1.6 million. And
Okay.
mostly suited because of that large investment for large operations. And you can do what they would call hub and spoke kinds of systems. So one farm has the digester, and then many farms or in food waste and whatnot all are spoking into this. But of
Okay.
course, you get a lot of transportation costs. You got to
Right.
worry about tracking biosecurity in a number of these instances.
Okay.
So it's not uncostly or complicated or what have you.
Right.
But Europe, as it's moved along, has gone again to having smaller scale systems available. And that's a part of the partners that we've selected with Agrihub to work with. Is we are working on some projects that are hub and spoke, and we're very excited about some of that. But we are also working on some small scale systems that, most of the hubs are like 100,000 tons as a bare minimum and larger per year.
Okay.
And so that can be quite a number of farms,
Yeah.
come together to contribute that.
Okay.
We are working with some systems that can start at as small as 5,000.
Okay. Yeah. So much smaller than 100,000.
Yeah, and a lot of people will react to biogas and these things almost like, oh, it's all new, and well,
Mhm,
30
mhm.
years of experience with anaerobic digesters, right? Tank-based systems, 30 years or more. But when you really track back the history of biogas, I'm often facetious with it, and I go, well, it's only about 3,000 years old, which is very serious. And the
Right.
facetious part is I'll say, and it's been using these crazy materials. I don't know, Jake, if you would ever hear of this space science material. It's called clay.
No, never heard of it.
and so they had, for all these years, all the sophistication of literally burying the organic waste with a clay dome, essentially, very
Okay.
often very small pits, right?
Yeah.
You know, literally used by hunter gatherer types, uh,
Okay.
particularly in East Asia and that kind of stuff. So it goes
Okay.
way back, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Back to the Future again. Well, we're using some different materials and approaches, and the outputs are still the same. 3,000 years ago, the little clay pit created methane, and they use it for cooking gas.
Hmm.
That was primarily, the approach. Oh, now we might use it in a generator to also generate electricity.
Hmm. Hmm.
But biogas is a really hot commodity currently amongst a fair number of the gas pipeline companies, because it's their mode of greening. And then, as is the case, this process is kind of a contained um, type of composting,
Okay. Right.
right? The outputs are still fertilizer slash soil amendment,
Hmm.
right? So there's some that say, well, if you run it through this process and you get the biogas, you're going to get less soil amendment, less nitrogen, less, um, micronutrients,
Okay.
which isn't the case at all.
Okay.
Um, Little bit of changing of form certainly makes the nitrogen more readily available. Fresh manures too much is no good on the fields, as all
Mhm.
farmers know.
Right.
Um, this form ends up being in that becoming that much more slow release materials once it's gone through that process.
Good. Yeah. So kind of ready to go.
Yeah, so this is kind of a different picture of what it might look like, and particularly if it's a hub and spoke, I got trucks coming in, etc., and I'm running it through the digester and some processes. I got water coming out. I'm running it through centrifuge and other wastewater treatment systems. And as much as we have a hard time in some uh, groups thinking that, well, water is always recycled in this way, somehow or other, might go through a lot of soil over, maybe even years, right, in that cleaning process. But nevertheless, we repurify water, right?
Mm-hmm.
And around it goes.
Right.
And we kind of all know that. Can we do that on farm and end up right back at potable water? The answer is absolutely yes. Uh, right up to the most stringent of potable waters, international potable water standards. So these can be, as long as they have a good payback, can be really an enormous new revenue generator and boon for farms
Right.
dealing with odor issues, waste management issues, getting nutrients back to the fields, further reducing fossil fuel use, particularly in nitrogen.
Right. It just
And
level
because,
of
pardon me,
efficiency, like you talk, well, like you opened with, right? It's the efficiency. It's all these things are being done, or maybe not all of them, but some of these things are already being done. But it's adding a level of making sure everything's used to its fullest potential.
absolutely, which, literally, what is that anaerobic digester uh, tank doing? Not much more than keeping temperatures at a consistent level. The Mother Nature's army of um, uh, microbiology can do their work.
Right. Right.
If the
Yep.
temperature drops, they go dormant.
Mm-hmm.
No biogas, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's where the efficiency comes from. Literally, more or less, we're just creating environments where Mother Nature will work with us,
Right.
and
Yep.
that's always a lot easier than working against her.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, so because biogas is such a attractive area at this time, particularly for big players in natural gas, we're working on a number of projects where the farmer is the host for this stuff. They're sharing the revenues, but they don't even have to put up any capital. In other words, they get an immediate positive return.
Turn. Yeah. Okay.
A lot of the challenge is being able to size it and have the right materials, um, so that Mother Nature can do her thing.
Sure.
So if I just have manures and I have no nitrogen, then I'm not going to end up with biogas production.
Okay.
So sometimes people call it a recipe.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's really what we're doing. We're taking those steps with Agrihub. It's really a natural progressive and on Penner and the family of companies journey. Within that barn, we end up doing things like we can install solar PV. This is concentrated solar. We can talk about that another day. How we capture the sun to create steam and hot water, and keep those water temperatures where we need for the microbiology to all work and so forth. And so, as I say, some different materials. They wouldn't have had a bunch of these materials or capabilities in the late 1800s, but they did have the capabilities to a degree. And so
Right.
it's back to the future to some
Yeah.
degree.
So if a farmer or producer is looking at something like this, I mean, where's a good place to start? Is it just kind of looking at your needs? Is it going to be someone who's just looking for that future technology, or what do those conversations look like, Dan?
Well, I guess that's why I put the email address on the
Yeah,
screen is by all means email us. We're very interested in having those collaborative discussions. Um, Not every farmer is going to do all of this at once by any means.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
they'll choose potentially some different systems, and I just come back to that's a huge advantage of the Agrihub family is that there's an awful lot of decades of experience and hundreds of employees with lots of disciplines. So um, we'll pick and choose, uh, trying to cater to the needs of that farmer.
Yeah, that's great. So it is something. It's not all or nothing. It's something where you can really kind of piece together those elements that are maybe gonna work the best on your farm right away, and it's something that could be added to in the future when maybe some of that revenue is recaptured uh, or needs arise. So that's
Absolutely,
okay.
absolutely.
So we've talked mostly about cattle. What are, some other solutions, new standard, down here we primarily at this point, obviously branching into to cattle and other areas of agriculture. But can we talk a little bit about poultry solutions, how this might work in, and maybe even hogs as well?
Yeah, that's a great question, and absolutely the case. So when you look at what the nutritional needs of the hog or the poultry are, you're going to grow different microgreens,
Right.
essentially.
Yep.
So you're going to select based on that. For whatever reason, I'm not even sure of the reason, dairy cattle has been maybe the most advanced. But as I say, we're in conversations with parties that are doing poultry, are doing some level of poultry and
Okay.
some level of hogs, and they're working out those recipes that will make sense. Um, there's lots that we know. Of course, you can ask any farmer, well, what uh, greens in the field do you prefer your hogs eat, right?
Yeah. Right.
But being able to do a certain amount of monoculture in the trays are a lot different than the field, and so I think that is probably the biggest area where there's more and more need for science and testing and understanding that stuff.
Okay. Well, this is great. Yeah, there's so much here. Like you mentioned, I think we could probably do a podcast on each element, right, of the regenerative ag
Well, I
loop.
suspect
Uh,
we will.
yeah, that would be the hope. So yeah, we'd love to hear from you. If you're listening to this, definitely check out the show notes. I will have Dan's email in there so you can get in touch with him directly with questions about this. And if you have questions or just things you guys want to hear us chat about, we'd love to hear from you. So we really want to make this engaging and something that the community is interested in. So yeah, Dan, anything else you want to close with, or
No, it's a
feel
pleasure
like you've put it all out
do
there at
this
this
with
point?
you, Jake, and look forward to the next one. Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks, Dan, and thanks everybody for listening. We'll catch you again soon.
Thanks.